G'day everyone, it has been a huge week for me and the bus, and I've got something really exciting to show you. Are you ready? The bus is registered! Yeah, so as of today, the bus is officially registered as a motorhome here in Queensland, and I am so happy and also really relieved and also a bit proud, because this is a huge deal for me, because for me it's more than just a piece of paper that says the vehicle's registered. For me, it's marking a huge milestone, and it basically means that I've managed to achieve in reality what's been basically a dream of mine for so many years. So I first started dreaming about the whole bus life thing back in, I think it was 2016, and it took me quite a few years, first of all, just to save enough money to be able to buy my first bus. And then if you followed my videos right from the beginning, you'll know that I had a lot of issues with that first bus, and it was quite a stressful journey in the beginning, and I ended up selling that one and getting the coaster instead, which I'm really happy about. And then there was all the work to get the coaster up to this point. So for me to now be able to say I now have an officially registered motorhome and can now travel in it as much as I want, you know, that's basically a dream turned into reality. So I'm really happy, and I'm also really proud that I've managed to do it myself. Now obviously I've still got a lot of work to do to finish off the bus. It's nowhere near ready to live in full time. I still have, you know, cabinets and furniture to build. I still have to do all my plumbing. I still have to do all the electrical. So, you know, there's a lot of work, but at least it's at the point now where it's legally registered. I can do the rest of the conversion kind of in my own time without having someone look over my shoulder, and most importantly, I can take her out on the road and do little short trips while I'm finishing it off. So it's really exciting, and I thought I would make this video obviously to give you guys an update about what's happened, but also because I know a lot of people who are thinking about doing this themselves have a lot of questions about the process involved in registering a motorhome and what is actually required. So I thought I would make this post to share my experience and what I needed to do, and hopefully it'll help answer some of the questions that you guys have. Now, bear in mind that I live in Queensland, so the rules and regulations that I'm going to be talking about in this video only apply to registering a motorhome in Queensland. Every state in Australia has its own rules and different regulations about what's required, so you'll have to check with your local transport department if you're outside of Queensland to find out what's required for you. And it's also worth noting that my coaster is still a heavy vehicle, so I haven't got the GVM downgraded like a lot of people do. It has a GVM of 4,990 kilos, so a fraction under 5 tonne, and because it's over 4.5 tonne GVM, it's classified as a heavy vehicle. So that means there are slightly different rules about what I needed to do to get it registered compared to someone who has downgraded their coaster to be able to drive it on an ordinary car license. So bear that in mind too. If you're planning on downgrading your GVM, there might be slightly different regulations that you need to follow. But basically the process is the same. So first thing to consider is there are a number of criteria that the vehicle must meet in order to be classified as a motorhome. And you can actually see what these are. If you go onto the Queensland Transport website, you can bring up a copy of the Motorhome Inspection report that the inspectors will fill out when they come to look at your vehicle. I'll put a link to that in the description below so you can have a look. But it's this section of the form here where it states the criteria that you need to meet in order to be classified as a motorhome. So in Queensland, first of all, the residential quarters must be permanently attached to the vehicle. Now obviously if you've got a coaster like I have, this isn't an issue because you're actually building things inside the bus itself and attaching it to the walls and the floor of the bus. I think this is referring to vehicles such as, you know, utes that have slide-on campers attached to the back of them. So the residential quarters are in the slide-on camper section, but that's not actually permanently fixed to the ute, and therefore you couldn't register that as a motorhome. It would have to be registered under some other category. You need rigidly fixed sleeping berths, which basically means you need a bed that's permanently fixed to the vehicle in some way. You need rigidly fixed cooking facilities. Now, I have heard of some people getting approved with just a microwave that sits on a bench and plugs into the wall. Technically, that's not in the regulations. The regulations said it has to be something that's permanently fixed, such as a cooktop like screwed into the bench top, and so on. You can't just have a camping stove that you pull out of a drawer and sit on the table. My stove is actually like attached to a shelf that's built into my cabinet, so it was considered to be fixed for the purposes of this. So you need rigidly fixed cooking facilities. You need a rigidly fixed table. Now, they do say that the table can be removable. In some layouts, people have a table that then can convert down into a bed and so on, or you can remove the table for travel. So that's allowed as long as the things that the table attaches to are permanently fixed to the vehicle. You also need designated travel seating for the number of sleeping berths that you have. And what that means is if you've got a bed for one person, then you need one designated traveling seat. If you've got a bed for two people, then you need at least two traveling seats. And that means approved traveling seats with approved seat belts and everything like that. Now, a lot of people get confused on this, but if the rule is you can have more seats than beds, but you can't have more beds than seats. So for instance, you can't have a double bed but only have the driver's seat and no passenger seat, because you've got sleeping facilities for two people. You need at least two traveling seats in the bus. If you've got a double bed and two bunk beds, that's 4 people can sleep in the bus, so you need at least 4 travel seats. But you can have 4 travel seats and only sleeping for 1 or 2 people. That's fine. But you need at least 1 travel seat for every sleeping berth that you have in the bus. You also need rigidly fixed storage. Now, that could be as simple as a storage box that's bolted into the floor. In my case, I've got a kitchen cabinet that's fixed to the bus and has shelves and containers for storage inside it. You also need an approved fire extinguisher somewhere in the living quarters. And you need at least 1 outward opening or sliding door on the rear or the left-hand side of the living quarters. So in my case, I have the main side entrance door, which is the plug style sliding door of the coaster, so it actually opens out and down the side of the bus. Now, bear this in mind, because a lot of coasters have a bifold door, which is different to the one I have, and that actually it's like a concertina door that opens up inside the stairwell. Bifold doors are no longer considered acceptable for motorhomes. Now, a lot of people still have them because their motorhomes were registered before this rule came into effect, and so they're able to keep their original bifold doors. But a lot of people are finding now, if they have a coaster with a bifold door, they actually need to modify it in some way so that it meets this outward opening criteria. And there's ways that can be done. Some people, just change the hinges around so that it actually opens out like a single ordinary door. Some people ditch it altogether and put a caravan door in. There's lots of options, but you just have to be mindful of that you do need an outward opening or sliding door on the left-hand side or the rear of the living space. And you can't block that off with a bed or a table or anything else. It has to be fully accessible to get in and out of the vehicle. And the last thing that you need to comply with here in Queensland is that the vehicle can't have any designated load carrying area. So for instance, you can't be a truck or a panel van that's got a cargo area in the back that's obviously for carrying goods. Its purpose needs to be as a living space, not cargo carrying. And so they're the only criteria for registering as a motorhome here in Queensland. Now, note that you don't need to have any plumbing installed. You don't need to have any kind of electrical system installed for the purposes of registration. I know some insurance companies won't consider you to be a motorhome unless you've got a sink and some plumbing installed. So you may need to have those things in order to get full insurance cover for the motorhome, but in Queensland you don't need them for registration. However, you may need electrical or gas certification if the stove that you've got runs off one of those things. So if you've got an electrical or a gas cooktop installed in your motorhome, then you need to have the appropriate certification for that. My stove is an alcohol burning stove that actually runs off methylated spirits. There's no gas installation required. It doesn't require any electricity at all. So I didn't need any other certification for that. So you can see I've got my bed. So I've got my rigidly fixed sleeping berths. I've got my table. Mine's actually removable, but it is fixed when it's in position. I've got my fixed storage because I've got my kitchen cabinet here, and I've got my fixed cooking facilities because my stove is built in to the kitchen cabinet. And I have 2 designated travel seats at the front of the bus. And I've got my fire extinguisher. And I've got 1 outward opening door here on the side, and I've got another outward opening door here on the back. So once you've got to the point where you've built all of those things in your bus and it meets all of those criteria, then you need to get it inspected by a certified inspector and the motorhome inspection form that they need to fill out. And part of that form is to tick off all of those criteria to ensure that you meet those. And then the rest of the form is mostly about measuring up the vehicle. So they measure the length, the width, the height, the distance between the axles and the rear overhang and so on, just to make sure that it all complies with the legal limits for travelling on the road, and all of that gets recorded. Now, there are lots of different people that can do that inspection. You can get a mobile person to come out to your house. You don't actually need to take the coaster into the transport department to have them inspect it. If you go onto the Queensland Transport Department, and I'll put a link to this in the description below as well, there's a list of all the people that in Queensland that are approved by the Transport Department for doing inspections and mod plates and so on, so you can do a search for your area. And a lot of the guys that do the normal roadworthy inspections for cars and caravans and so on can do this kind of thing as well. So in my case, I got a mobile vehicle inspector to come out to my house and inspect the bus, and he did the motorhome inspection form. He also did my COI, and he also did the assessment and gave me the mod plate that I needed for changing the seating. And all up, I think it cost me a little bit under $600. That included his travel time to come out to my house and do all of that, which I thought was reasonable. Now, you'll notice that my bus is clearly not finished because I still have, exposed insulation. I've got wall frames here that haven't been clad yet. The inspector didn't care about any of that. As long as what you have in the bus is solid and you haven't got insulation that's going to fall out or things that are going to fall out from the walls when you're driving, and that what you have built is solid and meets the appropriate standards, then that's all that matters. So in order to then register the vehicle, there's a few things that you'll need when you go into the transport department. One is that completed motorhome inspection form, so you need to get that filled out and signed off by an approved person. You also need a valid roadworthy certificate. Now, if your coaster has a GVM of less than 4.5 tonne and it can be driven on a car licence, then you just need an ordinary safety certificate like you would for any car. As I said, my coaster is still classified as a heavy vehicle, so I actually need a heavy vehicle safety certificate or a certificate of inspection, a COI. I actually need to get one of those every year here in Queensland, so I need a valid COI. You'll need your current Queensland driver's licence because they need proof of residential address in Queensland and a proof of addresses to where the vehicle's going to be garaged. And you also need some evidence of the tare weight of the vehicle. Now, the tare weight is how much the vehicle weighs when it's empty. In my case, I just took in my last registration papers, which were from last year, which had the original tare weight of the bus on it, and they accepted that. It may have been because I'm not changing the GVM at all. If you're downgrading to a lower GVM, then they may ask for a weighbridge certificate to get an updated tare weight. I'm not sure, but just bear that in mind. In my case, they accepted the previous rego papers. The other things that you may require, again, depending on what you've actually done with your bus, as I said before, you may need gas certification if your cooktop is a gas cooktop. You may need modification certificate for any seating changes that you've done. So in my case, the bus originally had 20 seats. I took them all out and left only 2 in, and I took a copy of that certificate into the transport department as well. You don't have to take the coaster itself into the transport department. If you've had all the inspections carried out at home, all you need is the paperwork, and it's all done over the counter. So I handed all my paperwork in over the counter, I handed over the money, and I walked out with 2 shiny new number plates. So I know some people are going to be asking how much it cost. I paid $1,145. That was for a new registration. So the bus had been unregistered for about a year before I registered it this time. So it was a new registration. It was for 12 months rego. Here in Queensland, the registration includes the compulsory third-party insurance, so that included CTP. And it also, because it's a new registration, there's a few admin fees and so on. So subsequent renewals will be a fraction cheaper than that. So I hope that helps some of you guys that might have had questions or weren't sure about what was involved. If you've got any questions that you want to ask me, please leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best. I'm not an expert in these things. I can only share what my experience was. But yeah, feel free to comment. As I said, every state will be different, so you need to check with your transport department if you live outside Queensland. But hopefully this gives you some idea of what to expect. So, as for what happens next for my bus, obviously I still have a lot more work to do. I'm actually going to be taking a little step back for a couple of weeks because I'm reopening my business at the end of the month, and so I've got a lot of work to do to be ready for that. So I'm going to be focusing on that for the next few weeks. But the next thing I build in the bus will probably be Pepper's seat up the front, because I want to start getting her used to being in the bus and traveling and so on. So I will do that first, and then obviously I still need to build a lot more inside. I've got another kitchen cabinet to build. I've got the bathroom up the back. I've got overhead cabinets. Lots and lots of work to do, so there'll be a lot more videos to come, so stay tuned.